Hi, this is a follow-up to the previous video on a month with OpenAI's Codex. For the same reasons, I have marked this one as paid promotion, which is I received the Codex service for free. I didn't pay for it, and I received it from an OpenAI employee, and I believe that means I have to tick the paid promotion icon. Again, they're not getting review of this. What I have to say, I don't expect them to necessarily like what I'm about to say. Anyway, in this video, I'm just going to address some loose ends from that video. So thoughts I started before I interrupted myself with some diversion and never finished, and a few questions that people have had and suggestions. So um, let me get started. So I said that the existence of AI changes the economics of coding, and that I felt that it should do that. What I mean by that, or the most immediate thing for that, is I used it to I gave it an objective, had it build a complete system using decisions, or allowing it to make decisions, or occasionally using decisions where I didn't believe in that was the best way to go. So in that case, I'm not using the software. I'm not using it to create software that I expect to use in the long term, because I expect, because the decisions are what I believe are poor decisions, or not the correct decision. My expectation is that it will be something I don't want. But the point is, whenever I make one of those judgment calls on is this or is this not the right way to go, there's some error there, right? Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I like to think that I'm pretty good at making the right decision. But for reference, a really good world-class stock trader only has to be right about 56% of the time. And I'm probably not as good a software engineer as the best stock traders are at stock trading. And yet, so why would I delude myself that my decision making is that much better about unknowable future possibilities that compared to theirs? What I found it useful to do was to have Codex, GPT 5.4 and then 5.5 build versions of give them the vaguest of outlines, have them build a prototype of, and allow them to make whatever decisions they wanted to make between the initial thing and the prototype, and then have a look at it. And as I say, I don't expect that to be the right thing, and it wasn't. But looking at it gave me more information than if I had sat for the same amount of time just trying to reason things through and make the right decision the first time. And so, what I used GPT 5.4 to make a prototype, and then I looked at it and thought about what I learned from that. So it took about 9 hours of machine time to do the work. About 90 minutes total of my time was involved, so maybe 10 minutes to kick it off, and an hour and 20 to look at the outcome and see what I decided. And then I throw it away. Like, this is code that is for the purpose of throwing away. But in 90 minutes of my time and 9 hours of machine time, there's no way I would learn more than that, more than I got out of it. And I obviously, that was a day where I kicked it off. I went to look at some birds, and then I came back and evaluated the answers. I had a pretty good day. Wasn't primarily about work, and I got more done than I would have in the pre-AI days of if I just sat there and thought about the whole, what am I trying to do for another 9 hours? I wouldn't have made really any progress at all, because it's not that kind of problem. So having it make that first one with 5.4, I had it make something totally open-ended. It could make whatever decisions it wanted, and I expected that it would make choices that I would not approve of, just because because this is a totally novel class of problem that I've given it, and it isn't a human, and it's trying to do like the kind of guiding principle is what will a human find easier to code review, and like it doesn't have a mental model of that because there's very little literature about it. So anyway, that's the problem I had it work on. I had it make me a prototype. I looked at the results. I learned, as I say, more from that than the alternative where I don't do that. Therefore, it was a valuable use of the technology. That's, as I say, that's something I think it should be used for. Then I made a second prototype using GPT-5.5, which had come out between the one time and the other. And that one, I didn't leave it quite as unconstrained because I didn't want it to, roll the dice and actually make basically the same thing again. So I constrained it to not make the first thing, but I also guided it to do, again, something I thought this is not the right way to do it. But this was one where in my mind, it's like, I'm 75% sure I know the right way to do it, and I'm 25% sure this other way is the wrong, this other thing could be the right way to do it. I'd just weight it much less likely. But I had GPT-5.5 build me the 25% option, not the 75% option, just to explore if I pushed that way, does it go anywhere? And so that prototype, I pushed it a lot further. And then I got to a point where it was a bit too, where I felt I'd learned everything I needed to learn about that approach. And then I tried to slew that pivot, I guess is the right term for this, pivot that prototype into a different direction, partly because of, at that point, I was less experienced with using AI and I didn't know it was going to be very hard to have it forget the previous direction of the project and focus on the new one, and which appears to have been the major problem. But yeah, again, I wanted to explore a variant of, okay, but so that bit doesn't work. But in doing that, I've seen another way that I also think probably isn't going to be that productive, but I would like to explore it. So I explored that with the second prototype, and then again evaluate where we are, and then throw that code away. Like it isn't code that I would want anyone to use, but that wasn't what it was there for. It was there to explore: is this something that has a future? Like even if I looked at it and thought, yeah, almost all of these decisions are correct, it was deliberately done in a way that optimized for find out if this decision makes sense, not the priority of this is going to be code I want to keep. So it would have been a throwaway prototyping even if it had worked, and I would have expected to have to go back and build the real thing with the same decisions, but with the focus on do it right, not do it fast. But by saying do it fast, find out, show me what it looks like if we do this, I learned so much. And then go and try and do a third prototype. It's still a prototype, but this time making the decisions that I think are correct. But I can't stress this enough, they're not the same. Even if many of them are the same as the decision I would have thought was correct before I did those experiments, I'm now so much more certain that the decisions I've made are correct. And some of them are not the decision. I can confirm some of them are not the decision I would have made if I hadn't done those throwaway prototypes first. And so I'm ending up building something different because of what I learned having AI explore a space fail. It was set up to fail. It was intended to fail. It's the nature of the failure of that project is what was important. And that, as I say, this is not a change in open-ended capability, right? You could always have done this, and for some projects it was done before. I've been part of the projects that are on the, we're just trying to find out here and we expect it to fail, but we've got to do it anyway to be sure. But you didn't do those kind of projects too often in the past because it was expensive to have. Like, you're spending millions and millions having a team of people work for 3 or 4 months on something that you think isn't going to work, but you just need to understand why. And now that cost is down from millions and months to days or hours, and what, depending on, but if you're doing it with the subscription pricing, is probably $10 worth of your subscription. If you're doing API pricing, it's probably more like $150, $200, I think. That's a totally different game. Like, I think you're mad now if you're making a decision about which direction to go in software and you don't just have something prototype both ways and then throw away both the resulting pieces of code and build it again correctly once you know which one is correct. But like, you surely must explore, by actually doing it, the prototype, the possibility space. Now it's so cheap to do it. So that's what I mean by it changes the economics. And anyway, I've linked all the 3 projects I just mentioned in the video description. They're all on GitHub. Again, I cannot stress this enough. None of them are meant to be the best code that GPT could write. It was told not to, or didn't ask it to make it maintainable. I didn't ask it to make it elegant. I asked it to do it quickly and show me what it looks like so I can try it out. And also, please don't judge me on don't judge these as though they're my best engineering effort. They're not. They are. I want to know the answer to a specific question, and I can't even necessarily articulate clearly to you what that question is. You can look through the whole Git history is there. Like, I had both models commit as they went, and you should be able to infer from that approximately what I asked it to do at each stage. And if you really want to do that, but I'm sharing it from the point of view of openness. I do not think it's worth your time to look at the first 2, unless you're particularly interested in, when you ask AI to build your prototype, what does it actually do? Like, I haven't looked at the code because I didn't care. I just wanted to get to where I could run it, see what the user experience was like if that world was real, and then make a decision about whether that's the experience I wanted people to have. But the third project is much more, I was guiding it in the direction of making the decisions which I then had more faith were the correct way to go, and making the graph representation of software engineering a real thing. And you might choose to look at that if you're interested in that ultimate project. You might again, I don't know that the code itself is particularly valuable. Most of the log of what I think is the things to do is in the decisions.md and in the README. And if you wanted to take it forward to make that real for you, if I've convinced you that this is the right thing to build, just take the docs, build it again. It's going to be easier than trying to understand what I had Codex build for me. You may or may not have seen, I put a video out about my golf practice system, and in that I talk about the golf ball flight model. Now, that is where I had a very tight concept of what the software needed to do, and I had I described that to GPT-5.4, I believe it was, that did most of the work, and then I had it build it in C++ and in Kotlin and in JavaScript. And I've published that code to GitHub as well now. So that is where I'm kind of more happy for you to judge what it can do as far as code goes. And I'm more happy to be judged for what I asked it to do. That's a real project. That's code I'm actually using that I intended to be maintainable. And so yes, so I published that to GitHub. I will link, there's a page on my GitHub pages now where you can put in launch parameters for a golf ball and change the atmospheric conditions, like the altitude primarily, or the humidity or the temperature, and see what the difference in ball flight is. Because someone on Reddit asked, is it true that if I go to Mexico City and hit my 7-iron, it will go 20 yards further? And the answer is, of course, well, not exactly. But if you know your launch numbers from where you start, you can just put them into my flight model and get an exact answer. So, and it was easier for me to make that web page exist than to describe to them what the true answer to their question was. So that's what I did. I think that's it for like specific things I mentioned in the videos previously that I want to share. I don't want to share the whole launch monitor infrastructure stuff, because again, that will reveal which launch monitor I actually used, which I am reluctant to do. So I've had a couple of questions. The most interesting one is, did this experience change how I think about local AI models versus hosted ones? Because of course, GPT 5.5 and 5.4 on Codex are hosted models, but I'm interacting with the local UI. In my case, I just use the terminal interface. Did it change how I think about those? So my previous stance has been that I was pretty confident I didn't want to use hosted models, and I'm now even more confident I don't want to use hosted models. Now, that might seem strange because I had a really good experience using the Codex. It was quite amazing what you could do with it and how fast you could get stuff done with it. And that's clearly a much more positive experience than using open weights model on my own compute system to try and do the same kind of work, which I have tried to do in the past. But the reason it makes me more down on hosted models than I was before is that this is not the kind of thing that is a toy, or that you need, that you have flexibility in when you're going to use it. This is such a accelerator to productivity that you have to have it, and you have to have it available reliably, and you have to reorient your whole systems around the existence of this. And that means, for that to make sort of rational business sense, that you need certain amount of, or certainty, or at least a level of assurance around supply that I don't feel like I can get from a hosted model in the current climate. So the problems with a hosted model are updates can be made to things like the system prompt or the fine tuning or whatever, that have the goal of improving the system in general, or improving someone else's use case of it, and have this side effect of making how I was trying to use it worse. And that's a risk I don't want to have. Secondly, there's the price/availability risk. Every AI company is whinging about not being able to buy enough compute. So what must happen is that the price of tokens must increase, or rationing has to happen. And either of those on the hosted side can be forced upon me as a consumer of hosted models, if that's what I've chosen to base my business upon. And I'd rather, that makes it much harder to say, well, okay, it is rational to reorient my business around using AI to accelerate the coding, because it makes sense given a certain level of price and availability. If the pricing goes up and the availability goes down, compared to where I made that decision, does it still make sense? Not necessarily. There's got to be a break point there where it flips from being sensible to being stupid, and I don't see how that price and availability question. Well, price, perhaps I can work out how to hedge that, but availability, if rationing comes in effectively, is not something I can deal with, and there's no hedge for the system prompt changing or the fine tune changing without in cases where that doesn't change the model name, which, like, again, any specific AI company may be able to say that they've never done that and they never will, but plenty of other ones have done that. And so as an industry, your problem is that you don't look, as an industry, trustworthy in that sense, right? And also you can be compelled to change your system prompt by government fiat or by like pressure groups in the public relations kind of way, if you have to improve safety and you hack it in that way, like that's a disruption potentially to my business that I cannot hedge. Now I'm making having done all of that rant, you'll have noticed that is not a rant against closed weights models, and nothing in there said anything to do with the weights of the core model, and nothing in there had anything to do with the proprietary or closed nature of what you guys what OpenAI and Anthropic and the like are selling. If you want me to use it, or me, like this again, we're talking entirely my things and what I think I would do. I want it to be local. I want to know that the system prompt doesn't change underneath me. The model weights don't change underneath me. I don't need to know what they are. I just need to know they're not going to change. So if I build something that relies on how it works, it continues to work tomorrow, right? And if you say it needs to change or there's an improvement to be made if you change it, I would want to be able to verify that it doesn't break any of my existing stuff with whatever test process I need to go through to do that before I roll it out. But you could satisfy that set of requirements with a on-premises appliance. Because if it's an appliance that's in my office or in a data center that I personally control, and it's only processing work that I send it, so I'm not competing with the rest of the world for what compute this thing does, then I don't have the problem of token price fluctuation. Like, yeah, sure, if I have to pay for the electricity and the AC, but I already know how to hedge that. It's pretty standard stuff. If it's not the case that you can push updates to it whenever you want and I have to authorize them, then we've addressed my concerns about the thing changing underneath me in a way that breaks my business flows. And that's just gone away. It doesn't need to be open weights to be local or local enough for me, but as long as it's running in the cloud in a data center and I'm having to compete for compute with the whole world, I don't see how I can hedge that to where I'm comfortable reorienting my business around this and not making an unacceptable level of existential risk for my business at the same time. And I think the reason you see the AI companies pushing this cloud thing and you see a bit more reluctance in the rest of the world to pick it up is the disconnect. Like, the AI company marketing departments truly believe, I think, that their employees are using the same cloud, getting the same cloud experience as the rest of the world. Like, you might be using the same thing that you're selling to me as Cloud GPT, but it's not cloud for you. It's your data center. It's on-prem for you. It's cloud only for me. And the cloud part and the unexpected changes option and the internet connection risk, the competing for tokens with the rest of the world thing, that's part of the experience that I get and you don't, and that's why it feels different. And as I say, you can do the appliance thing. It's a well-trodden path. Many other software businesses have done that, and so you can go out and hire people who know how to do that because they've done it before, and that would satisfy all of my concerns. Or you can get to the kind of the state of cloud as it was for just general compute, like Amazon EC2 or whatever, where like all of the concerns I just said did exist for those clouds at the beginning, but it got to where they have shown to everyone that they have so much capacity that there's not a realistic risk of rationing, and there's not a realistic risk of massive price swings that can't be hedged against. And so we trust them to host our stuff. As long as like you guys are not there because because you're in this token crunch, you don't have enough GPUs, you don't have enough gigawatts, and you don't have enough cooling. And you keep telling everyone that. And that everyone believes it's to be true because you keep saying it. And like I believe you're telling the truth as well. But those three reasons are why I can't really recommend to anyone that they bet their business on the availability of, change their business in such a way that it only works if cloud AI is available. Whereas if you run it on-prem, then you can bet that that's going to be available because you can just make sure, in the same way that you make sure that your email servers are always available or whatever. And so for that reason, right now, I have to say local models. Like all of these are things you can fix. And in 3 or 4 years' time, the landscape will be very different because there probably will be enough data centers, enough compute, enough cooling, and this rant will look a bit stupid in that context. And I do hope you guys get there. But for now, I think you should consider sticking, 8 RTX Pro 6000s and a what do you call it? AMD EPYC motherboard in a box that you've welded shut and selling it to people as a GPT-5.4 appliance, or whatever version you want to put on there, and make it so it explodes if anyone tries to open the chassis. Or you don't make it explode, you make it release an acid and destroy the weights. So you preserve your IP in the model weights, but you let whoever's got that be in control of when it updates exactly what the system prompt says today and whether that changes, whether and when that changes, so that they are fully hedged against availability and pricing and stability of the product. I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do or the only thing to do, but you've got to be thinking about it because it's so obvious. Also to say, I don't think you're wrong if you choose a different path to me. Like if you as a business decide you want to do the cloud AI thing and you're happy with the risk you're taking, that can be totally rational. I may be overreacting. As I say, I'm not really in that world. I don't have to make that decision. But I can tell you where my head is right now with the information that I've got. The final thing I want to say that I don't think I mentioned, I spent some time trying to work out what changes in the economics of employment now that AI is as good as it appears to be. I think there's a few things. So I'll deal with the thing that makes me sound the most like an arrogant bastard first, which is one of the reasons you go to work for a business rather than just staying at home and not doing anything after you've got enough resources to choose to stay at home and do nothing if that's what you want to do. One of the reasons is for the experience of being a part of something that's bigger than what you could do on your own. And my observation with using the Codex and the latest models was that employers no longer have a monopoly on that feeling. It feels pretty expansive of my power to give work to Codex and have it produce software for me. Feels very similar to the experience of having, contractors report to me on behalf of a business where I tell them, here's what the business needs to do, please go and do it. And then I check in with them a week later. It feels extremely similar to that experience. So there's potentially a situation for senior employees who were previously willing to work because they enjoy that feeling and actually don't need to work for the money. Well, they can now rent that feeling for $200 a month. That's going to potentially make some people choose to retire when they previously would have continued working because they were in it for that feeling of expansion of multiplier of my power, and now they can have that feeling whenever they want. That observation I'm fairly certain of because I know my own mind. That's closest to what I am. So now on to the much more stupid stuff where I try to speculate who the winners and losers are in this. And I don't think that's the right kind of framing for this kind of massive change to the economy. It's going to change so much. Trying to work out who the net winners and net losers are is pretty much hopeless. But am I worried about people like new graduates being unable to get entry-level engineering jobs? Well, not necessarily. Like, I just think the amount of productivity that counts as entry level has just gone up a bit. But the other reason that I'm hopeful for them is I was very aware during the month that I was using Codex and these models that I was getting a bit better at using them towards the end of the month than I was at the beginning. Like, uncontroversially, I think that's true. And I don't have any kind of absolute frame of reference, but there's no reason to think I'm anywhere near the peak ability to use it towards the end of that month. Or if I am, it's entirely luck that I happen to be naturally behaving in the way that's close to the optimum way for them to be used. But I think that the kids these days who've had these tools for the last 3 or 4 years and been using them, as far as I can tell from media reports, pretty extensively for the last 3 or 4 years, they're going to surely be much better at using these to get the result that they want than I am. And the fact that they can't, review the generated C++ code or the generated Rust code to the same level that I can, probably not relevant. Like in the month I was using Codex, I reviewed almost none of its code because I didn't care. I just was willing to build it, test the outcome, and take it on that level. And I think people forget that the industry's been through things like this before. Like, there was a period where everyone worked in machine code, and then I think it was Grace Hopper invented assembly language, and you didn't have to be able to read machine code anymore. There was probably some existential, hand-wringing and stuff but kids won't learn what the machine code instructions are. It turned out that didn't matter. It isn't regarded as that important now. I mean, some people still can read machine code, and I used to be able to do it because of the nature of the job I was working on at the time. But it's not like, it's not a skill that I would say every software engineer needs. And we had the same when you invented higher level languages like BCPL and so forth. I'm sure there was hand wringing and wailing in the streets about how it was going to degrade people's ability to read assembly language instructions, and that would degrade the engineering skill set. And of course, it has that effect that people can't read assembly language, but also turned out that probably didn't really matter. And again, I've had jobs where I did need to read assembly language, but it wasn't all that hard to pick it up as an adult, and it wasn't all that. It's it just, for most of my career it has been irrelevant, and when it was relevant, it wasn't that hard for me to pick it up. And I think we're going to be looking at something similar with this layer of tooling, which is, it's not going to be like we can all whinge about how kids are going to lose the ability to read source code, and of course that is true, they will. But why do we think it's going to be different this time? Why do we think it's going to matter? I don't. I have much more difficulty trying to argue that it's important you should be able to read C or Rust or Python. I have much more difficulty trying to make that case than making the case that it should be important that you can read assembly language. And I already know that it's not important you can read assembly language. So it seems even less likely that it's critical that software engineer can read C. I mean, a lot of them can't now. Most people can only read fluently one or two programming languages, unless they've had a really weird career like I have, where they crossed through a lot of different places. But I just think it's going to become a niche specialty that you can read one of these historic programming languages. And I also think that's going to turn out to be totally fine. It might be, but I imagine it will be disruptive to everyone as we go through that period of time where some people can and some people can't, and some people think about computing in terms of the programming language, higher level programming languages, and some people don't. But so what? It's just a social change. We dealt with that before. So yeah, it is going to create a generation of young software engineers who would be totally ill-equipped to have the career in the context that I had my career. But guess what? They're not in that context. They're in a different context, and they're better suited to that context than I am. So I think they're probably going to be fine. I don't know. I don't know. As with any such speculation, I don't know how well it's going to age, but I think it's more likely that I'm the dinosaur with the irrelevant skills than that someone graduating college this year is the dinosaur with the irrelevant skills who's screwed. And that's frankly how it should be. Anyway, thank you all who got in touch, everyone who liked the video and watched it. It's been the most popular thing I did, which is a little bit depressing because it's not my favourite thing to talk about. And I hope you've found these follow-ups interesting. If there are more questions, I may do another follow-up video. But until such time as I have something else to say, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy yourselves. Bye-bye.